Joseph Saelee came into the competitive scene in 2018 and shocked the world with his insane talent, getting to unheard levels of the game, setting world records, and most notably, taking down the 7-time world champ Jonas Neubauer in the 2018 CTWC finals, as well as achieving the Fable 1.3. Tomohiro Tatejima, aka Greentea, also came into the classic Tetris competitive scene in 2018, transferring over from TGM, aka Tetris Grandmaster. Outstanding player in his own right and has numerous achievements in various Tetris games, and almost took down Jonas, falling short by one Tetris in the semifinals in 2018. These two Tetris masters meet each other in the round of 8 of CTWC 2019, and they give us some of the best Tetris in CTWC history. Joseph was victorious 3-1, advancing to the semis to take on Dan QZ. But what if the outcome was different, favoring either player? What was the deciding move of each game? This is what we are going to be going into today on CTMA, starting with game number 1. Before we can get into game 1, as you can see, this is a very long breakdown video. Some might even call it movie length, and there are timestamps to each game, as well as there are going to be timestamps in the description and in the pinned comment. So if you want to see a game in particular, please check out the timestamps on the screen or in the pinned comment or in the description, and it will take you there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into game 1. So as I said in the intro, I said that Joseph versus Greentea, their matchup at CTWC was the greatest Tetris that we have ever witnessed in a CTWC match, and it is very deservedly so. Both of these players are high level. Joseph actually incredibly high, has improved significant margins by CTWC. However, he does lose this first game, and there's actually multiple opportunities to where he had the ability to take this first game. So he's actually going to make the first mistake around 15 lines. So I'm going to actually tell you guys what I'm going to be doing different with this game as opposed to what I did with the Jonas versus Mega Retroman game. First things first, Anthony is not with me, as you guys can probably hear, so this is solo commentary. And second, instead of me just kind of assuming things where they should go, I will also be doing column callouts and things of that nature, so then you all will be able to illustrate what's going on, as well as there's going to be animations and separate board states here on the screen. So now we're actually going to get into the first real mistake, and this real mistake I consider a mistake is because before getting that Tetris, Joseph had put his board into a rather unique parity. And when I say unique parity, I say that it's a parity that favors particular pieces to solve it. So the unique parity would be this kind of like jagged formation on columns 5 through 8, if I'm not mistaken. Anyways, so what is going to happen is he's going to set up a delay burn, and he places the long bar in the 5th column. So that right there is definitely a better piece or a better placement for that long bar, but we'll actually go into that shortly. But as you can see, now he's forced to set up a T-spin, which he's forced to do a couple of burns, and not able to utilize that long bar. It is going to cost him a little bit more to get Tetris ready, and because of this, Joseph actually ends up burning 5 lines to start the game off with, and so Greentea is going to take a 1 Tetris lead. So now the question is, what could have Joseph done differently to avoid burning these 5 lines in a game where you have same piece sets? Every long bar not utilized by yourself could potentially be utilized by your opponent to give them an advantage on your score. So Joseph is going to knock down a Tetris. First things first, what he should have done is, instead of placing this J in the 9th column to set it up as a delayed burn, he should have placed the J in columns 2 through 3 and then placed the I in columns 9. In doing so, not only is he Tetris ready, but he now doesn't have any like necessarily risky delayed burns. Plus the next piece that comes would have been an S, and so then he would have been able to put the S in columns 5 through 6. Now following the sequence, he would have been able to put the following J in columns 8 through 9, then an L in columns 1 through 2, a Z in columns 2 through 3, a T in columns 6 through 7, O in columns 5 through 6, and then he would have got a Tetris, not having to burn any lines, keeping an incredibly clean and accommodating stack, as well as not falling behind a Tetris behind Greentea. So that's really the first kind of mistake made by Joseph. Is only 5 burn lines and it's a Tetris, and given that this is the game of NES Tetris, it is bound that your opponent is not going to be able to score off of a long bar that you potentially could score on and kind of tie them up. Skipping ahead a little bit, Joseph is actually going to make the next mistake of the game at roughly 33 lines, and we see he's running into a drought, and things are going to start off by that L piece. And with that L piece, he was able to still score the Tetris. However, if you look at his board state, this is one of the more trickier, more piece dependent board states. Right this currently, the ideal way to solve this is to get an I piece or a J piece to put over there in column 6, and to get an S or a T or a J piece to either tuck, spin, or burn off to the side and keep this in the most clean manner possible. It's a very piece dependent formation, and formations like this ideally want to be avoided if you're trying to play efficient Tetris. And so because of this, Joseph is now going to be forced to cover up his well, and now with that hole in the stack, he is going to be forced to take a triple if he would have got the long bar within a reasonable amount of time. And actually, this is actually going to cost him 7 burn lines. He did a great job of burning out of it efficiently, but 7 lines, that's 2 potential Tetrises that Greentea could have achieved where Joseph could not. So the question is, what could Joseph have done differently to avoid burning those 7 lines? So right here, Joseph is going to, right now he did the right move, putting the L in columns 9 through 10. That's going to burn down that double. Now, not sure if he wasn't able to react fast enough, but the J can go in columns 2 through 4 if you just like double rotate and lay it flat. Then the Z would have gone in columns 7 and 8, and then you would have achieved a Tetris. Now, even though I didn't look too far ahead in this sequence, because I don't feel like it was necessarily a need to, if he would have done that particular moveset, he would have been able to have a clean accommodating board. Only, I believe, a TZ dependency, which there's actually a couple of creative ways that he could have dug out of that. But he could also have placed the J anywhere on columns 2 through 5. It didn't have to be in specifically columns 2 through 4. Anywhere in columns 2 through 5, then put the Z in columns 7 through 8 and achieved a Tetris. So right now we're already up to 12 burned lines, and these 12 burned lines that's roughly 66,000-ish points that Greentea could have gotten that Joseph would have missed out of because of the lines that he burned. So we skipped ahead just to a little bit before 83 lines, as we see Greentea has just about a 2 Tetris lead. So earlier we talked about how Joseph kind of essentially sacrificed 3 Tetrises worth in burn lines. Greentea was only able to capitalize on 2 of them, so Greentea does have a temporary lead right now. Now, this is where things start to get risky for Joseph, because he's not given in the pieces that he wants, and now he is forced to kind of build up upon this hole. And I'm actually going to tell you guys right now, because of these decisions to build up on top of this hole and not really to kind of build the pieces in the most efficient way, Joseph is going to burn 14 lines. That's 3.5 potential Tetrises Greentea could have gotten that Joseph wouldn't have been able to get. So what could have Joseph done differently that would have allowed him to not have to burn 14 lines? Even though some burning might be necessary, burning 14 lines is really a lot. All right, so we just jump back a little bit just to kind of see, what puts him in this. Right now, he already has a J piece dependency, and right here, this is what he should have done. Basically, he should have, well, not basically. L should have gone in columns 9 through 10, Z goes in columns 5 through 6, and then the L goes in columns 4 through 5, and another Z in columns 5 through 6. Basically, the arrangement of that piece sequence, what it does is it not only burns out that delay burn that we just set up, putting that first L in columns 9 through 10, but it also keeps the board clean, and we no longer have a J piece dependency, which we only had to burn 3 lines to keep the board clean, as opposed to 14 lines. So 3 versus 14, I'd rather give away 1 Tetris to my opponent as opposed to give 3.5 Tetrises to my opponent. However, fortunately for Joseph, Greentea is also going to make a mistake here, which is going to cost him 12 lines. So His mistake is going to be made right here at 89 lines. Now, one thing I do kind of want to stress when talking about this is this particular formation in columns 8 and 9, where this is a 1 clean piece solve and a 2 other piece solve. So the cleanest way to solve this is just to get the L piece and tuck it right underneath. The other way to solve it is get the S piece, burn a double, or get an O and burn a double and go for either a tuck or a spin or a T piece to burn it off to the side. This formation is actually very dangerous, especially when you get on higher levels like level 19. And so then this already is kind of, uneasy to set up. Fortunately, he does get that J piece and he does get the long bar for the long bar dependency. However, now this is where things is, he's going to get a lot of O's here. And getting all these O's, he's not going to necessarily have a clean place for them. He knocks down a Tetris and he doesn't want to continue to build up the spire, but then that S piece just messes up the entire build, and because of that, Greentea is now forced with a very unfriendly build, but at the same time, he also has to dig out. And this dig, like I said, is going to cost him 12 lines. So, what is a way that he could have potentially navigated his way through that O burst? I mean, obviously, the players don't know what piece sequence they're going to get next, where the way that we're kind of talking about this is we're talking about it as a way from a board accommodation. And if his board was accommodating in a certain fashion, then the piece sequence that follows, he would have been able to place certain moves in certain places. So right here, instead of placing the O all the way over there to the left hand side, which is generally, as a Daz player, that is kind of, first instinct. You want to place that O all the way over to the left side, build up your left. Generally, the O piece for level 18, level 19 is the piece that you can get up to the highest point. So instead of placing that O over there on the left-hand column, what you could do is you could also place the O in columns 5 through 6. After placing the O in columns 5 through 6, you can either burn that S following up in columns 9 through 10, or you can just place it in columns 7 through 8. Then the L piece would go in columns 3 through 5, kind of like lay it flat. And generally, since you have the O piece there, it's going to, be a very nice clean build. And then after that L piece, you put another O in columns 1 through 2. At that point, that's when you want to put that O piece all the way over to the left. After putting that O piece in columns 1 through 2, you now have a very clean board. You can burn freely. You have the double well set up. It's just having this particular board with the kind of combination I'm talking about, it allows you to play more efficient Tetris, and now you're not necessarily put into a situation to where you panic. But anyways, after that, the second solution that he could have done after, this is after he takes this S double, is instead of placing that L like that, he could have set the L in columns 3 through 5 as an overhang, and then place another L on 3 and 5 on top of that, and then tuck the O underneath in columns 5 through 6, place the O anywhere, and then he would have been able to still score a Tetris. And so basically, that's just one way that he would have been able to kind of avoid this situation where he gets that S where he has no board accommodation for it and is forced to burn 12 lines. So before we go into the next area that I saw that was kind of a mistake, I like to point out that this next move by Joseph was actually a very clever setup, and I like the way that it was done, able to, get pieces all the way over, and this adjustment right here was very nice. Very efficient burn, and is able to keep his board clean. Creative builds are what I feel is going to be important with these upcoming CTWCs, because if you just build standard and you just build, essentially textbook, then if you go up against a person that has a more creative, more efficient way to get out of either digs or to set up for Tetrises, and you're on same piece sets, then in that situation, the more creative player is going to win because they simply played more efficient than you. But we are actually going to go into the next rather notable thing before we jump into the next mistake, because both of these players are actually going to play a very, very clean transition game up until one point in which Joseph is going to make a single mistake that almost put him completely out of the game. And right now we're actually getting to the other part that I wanted to point out that I felt was pretty notable, and it would be the quick tap that Greentea made. So now after doing that right here, that quick tap right there, getting that long bar over 7 high was a key moment in this game. Unable to really put that long bar anywhere else cleanly, since he was able to get that long bar over 7 high, now he just has to essentially fill in the gap in the middle of his stack instead of worrying about hanging, you know, pieces over to the left or trying to get like a J piece or some other piece all the way over to the left hand side. And so he is going to be able to tuck things and has a very clean dig out, just waiting for the right pieces, and that long bar is going to allow Greentea to stay alive. So that I felt was a key moment in this first game. If he would have hung that long bar or placed that long bar elsewhere, I'm not sure if Greentea would have been able to take game 1. Anyways, the next mistake isn't going to be made for another 40 lines, and it's actually going to be made by Joseph. So let's go ahead and jump and go see what was this mistake and what was the cost of this mistake. So we're getting close to where Joseph is going to make the mistake. He's going to knock down a Tetris now right here before we actually go into the mistake. And this particular mistake actually has 3 particular solutions for it. This formation on 19, incredibly dangerous. You want to try to avoid this because not only is your left weak, but it'd be different if your left had 3 spaces. With the left side with only columns 1 and 2, ideally you are looking for an O piece or the L piece. Don't necessarily want a J because the J piece is easier to hang, but you're kind of looking for these good pieces to kind of keep your stack right, and you're not really given too many options to burn down on the right side because your left side is only built up by 2. So this is one of the formations you want to try and avoid on 19. On 18, it's not necessarily as risky. It might lead to inefficient play. However, it is still you want to avoid this kind of stacking. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and get into what Joseph is going to kind of mess up. And you see how his board gets. He now sets up a jagged piece dependency, and he's not getting any of those jagged pieces. It is a nice double there, but still not really getting pieces. Opens it up. He tries to avoid setting up the long bar dependency on the left. So he is doing a great job giving what he kind of built himself into. But now if you're looking, you know, his ability to hyper tap really helps him out here, and that burn very key. But now he's gone so long without a Tetris, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, the amount of lines that Joseph had to burn from this missed adjustment, or missed adjustment since there's multiple ways that he could have gone about this. Joseph burned 19 lines on this, and burning 19 lines from level 24 to 25, that's a lot of points you're giving up to your opponent. And that's definitely not the kind of points that you want to give up to your opponent, especially when it's close game, like when you and your opponent are like 1 to 2 Tetrises apart. So what could have Joseph done differently to kind of avoid having to give away so many points to Greentea? Okay, so we just backed up to right after Joseph scored this Tetris. Now the first option, I'm going to explain, it kind of has a little bit of a gamble associated to it. So what he could have done is, obviously, he could have put the J in columns 6 through 7. Now, the reason why I say this particular solution has a gamble in it is because when you put the J in columns 6 through 7, you now convert that ST dependency into a JI dependency. And on level 19, you're not guaranteed any pieces. And given that if you don't get those pieces, that could potentially lead to you topping out. So although there is a gamble associated with it, still that gamble is better to have taken than what Joseph had built up, and you know, the way that we discussed that he built up. So anyways, the J could have gone in columns 6 through 7. The L would have gone in columns 1 through 2, and fortunately for him, after this, another J would have gone in columns 5 through 6. Now this keeps his board very clean. He's able to withstand the drought, able to have a more accommodating build. Now solution 2 is to set up a delay burn. Now delay burns on 19 are very risky because as as I say, delay burns, generally when I'm playing, I say delay burns are risky because most of the times they require a certain piece sequence or a couple of preferred pieces in order for them to work out in the most efficient manner. What he could have done is he could have put the J piece on columns 8 through 10 to set up the delay burn. The L piece would have gone in columns 1 through 2, then the J piece would have been laid flat through a double rotation on columns 1 through 3. The following O would have gone in 5 through 6, burning out the kind of delay burn, and then the final L after that O piece would go in columns 7 through 9, giving us once again another accommodating build, as well as, you know, just more options for moves. And like I said earlier, the focus of these piece sequences, or the sequences of the places that I'm talking about, the focus of these is board accommodation. And the reason why I say this board accommodation is because there's no way, if you're seeing a seed for the first time, are you going to be able to know what pieces are going to come next in the sequence. However, if your board is accommodated for pieces, then you might be able to, you know, place pieces in a certain way to where it'll be beneficial to your stack. That is kind of the way I'm approaching CTMA, at least for this particular episode. So the last solution is actually rather lengthy, but he does get a Tetris at the end of it. Right here, what he could have done is this first L, instead of putting it all the way over to the left hand side, he could have put the L in columns 6 through 7. Then a J would have gone in columns 7 through 9, you know, laid the J flat. Then the O would have gone in columns 1 through 2. A J would have gone in columns 8 through 10. L would have gone in columns 5 through 7. Then a J would have gone in columns 5 through 7. O in columns 1 through 2. And L in columns 8 through 9. Z in columns 5 through 7, and then he would have been able to score a Tetris. Now keep in mind there is going to be separate board states as well as animations kind of depicting what I am saying, so if you guys can't necessarily follow with the column callouts, there will be those separate board states as well as the animations to help you guys out. However, because he didn't do any of this, Joseph ends up burning 19 lines, and there's actually a way that he could have potentially gotten out of this dig a little bit sooner. So we're gonna go ahead and skip forward to roughly 195 lines, and not sure if you were able to catch that, but you see he's very high, he's up in a dig, he's doing his best to dig out. Now, right here, he has an opportunity to get out very cleanly, but what he does actually puts him in a risky position. So what he does is he's going to place that right there, and he's forced to place a couple pieces in rather unorthodox situations, because now in the way I'm going to discuss, instead of doing that, he now sets up an L piece dependency, as well as his board still isn't the best for burning down just quite yet, and hasn't been able to utilize those long bars. He eventually does get the long bar for the Tetris, but that's not quite the goal. The goal is you want to dig out, you know, as fast as possible and utilize every single long bar, especially when you're one Tetris away from your opponent's score. So even though it's a high level, it's a very high dig, there is still one thing he could have done, and it's actually rather simple. So right here, instead of laying the J piece splat, if you would have pushed the J piece all the way over to the left, then use the following, put the J piece all the way over to the left in columns 1 through 3, and put the Z in columns 4 through 5, then he could have used that T piece to put somewhere in columns 2 through 4, then the J piece would have gone in columns 8 through 10 to burn down, and then he would have scored a Tetris. So once again, very efficient way to dig out of that, as well as he now is keeping up with Greentea's score just a little bit, and seeing how his stack was built up, he probably would have got that second Tetris, and we would probably be looking at a tie game going into level 26. If you guys are watching this and you're still here, I'd like to know, what do you think that he could have done? If you guys want to take the time and, you know, map it out, come back and comment back on this video later, feel free to. I love to read all your comments, especially on this. But anyways, Joseph is going to unfortunately not be able to take this game, and Greentea is going to win 910,000 to Joseph's 873,000. separated by one Tetris, which I find is actually very interesting. And let me just give a brief explanation why. So another thing I decided to do differently than I did with Mega Retro Man versus Jonas, and part of that is because now there is reason to do differently, is I'm kind of going to show the mathematical side behind it. So as you can see, I kind of taken the basic overlay that CTWC uses for their gameplay and everything, and it shows the different kind of stats. Now up top is the score roughly approximated lost from burn lines. The box to the left, that's generally in your silver color, that is how many notable mistakes that were made. And then the box to the right, which would either be blue or red or any other color that it might be in the future, is lines burned from notable mistakes. And in the box below, it kind of shows how many points are lost. So for example, Greentea, from all the notable mistakes that I encountered through my study of this game, he lost roughly around 68,000 points. Joseph, however, he lost on level 18 182,000 points, 60,000 points on level 24, and roughly 61,000 points on level 25, putting his total to 303,800 points. Now, like I said, this is approximately mathematics, how many points that were lost due to the notable mistakes. So remember, this is just an approximate value, but this kind of shows how if Joseph were to not make at least one of those mistakes, or maybe not make two of those mistakes that were discussed earlier in the game one section, how dramatically that could have impacted the outcome of the first game and could potentially allow Joseph to have taken the first game. And so since Greentea played level 19 through 28 a bit more conservative. Now we're going to go ahead and jump into game 2, and this is the game where Joseph actually made CTWC history by scoring the first ever competition max out. However, Greentea wasn't necessarily as fortunate, and there's actually several things that Greentea could have done differently to potentially get a max out. And actually what I found was interesting is that if you did the math at combining all the lines that Greentea burned, Greentea would actually have tied Joseph at roughly around the same amount. So we're actually going to just skip ahead slightly forward to the first real mistake that Greentea makes. And as I'm just going to keep on repeating this throughout, each time I say mistake, essentially it's just a missed adjustment. And it's going to come right up to here, roughly around 22 lines. Now he does get the spin. Now right here, he does kind of put himself in a rather precarious situation, is because now he does that misshift, and there was actually a way where if he would have built his stack in a certain way, he could have avoided doing that misshift or that early Daz load or that particular misdrop. And so because of that particular misshift, his board is not in any way or shape or form to kind of try and dig out of this in the most necessarily efficient manner to start scoring Tetrises. And this is actually where Joseph is going to take a lead. Although Greentea does get out of it within a clean fashion, he is going to burn 7 lines, which is approximately 2 Tetrises, which is just about 40,000 points that he gives away to Joseph. So what could he have done differently? And this is actually one of the more shorter sequences that we have kind of gone over in today's video. So after he knocks down the spin, what he could have done is, instead of placing the long bar all the way over to the left hand side, he could have laid the long bar flat in columns 4 through 7, then place the Z in columns 8 through 10 to burn off that single. Although this isn't quite Tetris readiness, the main emphasis of the point I'm trying to make here is because his board accommodation would just be so much better off. He has more potential to place different pieces everywhere. He has a nice clean sloping build, and he does have actually kind of a 3 wide well for him to either burn off pieces if things start to get a little bit dicey, or just build up for a Tetris. And that board accommodation is what allows players to continue to play aggressive, as well as stay not necessarily safe, but stay confident they have ways to burn down in case the unfavorable happens and they do run into a drought. However, this kind of missed adjustment caused by that misdrop is going to cost Greentea 7 lines, and Joseph is actually going to take a Tetris lead because of that. So the next mistake is actually going to be made by Greentea roughly around 52 lines. Now there is actually 2 ways that Greentea could have kind of potentially solved this. One of these ways could have been done in a preventative measure, so put it to where it doesn't necessarily happen. And then another way is to where he's not burning 14 lines, because this next thing that happens, Greentea does end up burning 14 lines. So I'm gonna let it play out, and as you kind of see right here, it's a fair amount of board accommodation. However, he does have that kind of like jagged T-trough, and now his board's starting to get a little bit jagged, more piece dependent, and now you see Greentea is not necessarily in the best situations. This particular situation is actually one of the more precarious building situations to be in, is because you have a JI dependency, and ideally you generally want an I piece, because if you get a J, you still have a 2-piece dependency, as well as you have something covering up your well, which you either want a T or an I or a J. You're asking a lot from RNG when you put yourself in this particular build situation. So what Greentea should have done differently, instead of doing all this, which is going to cost him 14 lines, even though he does get seemingly some good pieces here, what Greentea could have done differently is he could have either done a preventative measure, which we're actually going to go into first, and then there was a solution that he could have done with the pieces that he was given. So basically, one preventative measure that could have been done is after he scores his Tetris, he starts to kind of build up for a Tetris. Now, instead of placing this L, generally that is, kind of the ideal thing. You want to place the L on the far side, protect your left. What he could have done was he could have set up a delay burn by placing the L in columns 8 through 10, then put the S in columns 6 through 7 and the Z in column 8 through 10. Although he won't be Tetris ready, you take a look at his board, it has more board accommodation, and that's kind of, that's the thing I'm stressing a lot, is board accommodation is the key to winning matches. Whoever has the better board accommodation, especially with same piece sets, chances are they are going to be able to win that particular game, because they are more accommodated for more pieces, and they're not forced to kind of throw pieces to the left or to the right, creating holes in their stack, or just putting themselves in unfavorable J positions. Now, even though that he doesn't make that adjustment, there is still another thing that he could have done to still, once again, alleviate the 14 line burn. So first things first, this Z piece should have gone in columns 4 through 6. Now, obviously you have many different positions where you can place the Z piece. You can either place it where Greentea is going to place it in columns 7 and 8. You can place it in columns 8 and 9. Or you can place it in what I recommend in columns 4 through 6. So after you place that Z piece in columns 4 through 6, then the J piece would go in columns 4 through 6 right on top of it. Then the S piece would go in columns 2 through 3. The Z piece would go in columns 8 through 9. He had, now with that particular sequence, and you placing those sequences in the way that I described, as you can see, board accommodation is just very great right here. And because of that board accommodation, even if he is running into a drought, he's able to burn off lines. And that's I guess that's kind of like the theme for this entire kind of breakdown, is board accommodation. That's, I guess, the theme. So anyways, Greentea isn't actually going to make the next, both of these players are going to play at almost the exact same pace, keeping up with each other after, of course, Greentea gets out of this 14 line burn. Both of these players are going to play at almost the exact same pace, keeping up pace with each other, all the way up until 141 lines. And this mistake at 141 lines is what's going to cause Greentea to no longer be able to win this game, and allow me to explain why. We already transitioned here. Greentea makes a misdrop at 136 lines. Now notice I said 141 lines is the mistake because there was one particular adjustment that Greentea could have done that would allow him to get out of it faster. How many lines exactly does Greentea give up with this next missed adjustment? 26 lines. 26 lines up against a player like Joseph that can score Tetrises very rapidly and consistently. I'd even say that since Joseph's playing at 80% Tetris rate, 80% of 26, we'll just say that's 80% of like 6 Tetrises. That's give or take 4 to 5 Tetrises. That's easily 100,000 points that Joseph had just boosted up his lead because Greentea was in a dig. And because of this 26 line deficit, Greentea is going to fall behind by more than 200,000 points. Now, for perspective, 200,000 points is vastly different than a 100,000 point lead. And here's why. If both of these players played at the exact same pace all the way up until level 26, that's when things start to look where it's Joseph has to top out now. From level 26 to 28, 250,000 points are possible to be scored, and that's if you're playing almost perfect Tetris. For example, right now, Joseph has a 219,000 lead. Greentea has to hope Joseph tops out before level 26, and then if Joseph tops out before level 26, Greentea has to play perfect level 26 through 28. And playing perfect for 3 straight levels on level 19 isn't an easy task to do. What was the move that Greentea could have done to potentially keep himself in the running this game? So we're going to go ahead and wait till we get to the point to where he gets there. Now we're at 142 lines. Now, essentially, what he could have done is he could have placed the Z piece in columns 1 through 3. Now, why place the Z piece in columns 1 through 3? Well, now this is where you're starting to look at it from more of a perspective of just board accommodation, but piece anticipation. Now, pretty sure that's a pretty new term, but this is where you're starting to get into my personal stacking theory. Is you now start to think ahead. If you think about it, you place that Z piece on columns 1 through 3. Now you have several pieces that you can kind of burn this out with. For example, you can place a T piece in there, burn it out, kind of keep it flat. You can place the following O piece in there. You can place a L piece in there. Heck, you can even place a J piece in there, but that does set up a couple of dependencies. And ideally you can place an I piece, but that's not what necessarily you want. And of course you can place an S piece over there. In doing all of these kind of things, you're placing these pieces. If you just made that one tiny adjustment, and you now open up this possibility for nearly every single piece in the game to fit in that one little gap in the middle of your stack. And having that great amount of a board accommodation, as well as anticipating the many different potential outcomes if you get one of these 4 ideal solves, that is what Greentea needed at this one exact moment. However, because Greentea was not able to do this adjustment, that is what's going to cost Greentea 26 lines. But anyways, let me go ahead and finish out the sequence. The Z piece would go, like I said, in columns 1 through 3. The O would go in columns 4 through 5. Another Z piece would go in columns 3 through 5. Then the S would finally go in columns 6 through 8. The T would go in columns 6 through 7. Greentea is clean, and he's ready to continue scoring Tetrises. He might not be able to necessarily hog Joseph's 174,000 point lead, but he still has the potential to put up a very close game and potentially even put himself back on max out pace. As I said, all he has to do is score 200,000 points from this point at level 20, or 240-ish thousand points from this point at level 20 all the way to level 25, which that's a lot of leeway. Even though he would have to play aggressive, still plenty of leeway for that. However, Greentea is unfortunately not going to be able to come back from this, and Joseph is going to tie it up 1-1. Before we get into game 3, the game of course I predict that all of you guys are waiting for, the game that made CTWC history, where both players, Joseph and Greentea, maxed out in the competitive game to bring us some of the best Tetris that we've seen in CTWC history. First, we're going to go over through the mathematical side of game 2. Now, I didn't write down any notable mistakes for Joseph in this particular game, so he has 0 points lost from burned lines, 0 notable mistakes, and 0 lines burned for notable mistakes. However, Greentea, on the other hand, seems like everything kind of fell on him this game. He had 4 notable mistakes, which costed him 47 lines. His score lost from burned lines was 268,000 points, and had he at least recovered maybe like 70-80% of that, he'll only be down 2 or 3 Tetrises behind Joseph at the point at which he topped out. But on level 18, he sacrificed 114,000 points. Level 29, he sacrificed 24,000. Level 20 and 21, he sacrificed a combined amount of 103,000. And level 22, he sacrificed 27,000. For perspective on this, the points that he sacrificed on level 20 and 21 were all from that 26 line burn because of that one decision not to make that adjustment. So that one decision put him from being in the realm of possibly being able to come back in the post transition up against Joseph to where he has to rely on Joseph to top out early before level 26 in order for him to take this game. But that's enough with this mathematical little section, and now for us to go ahead and get into the greatest match in CTWC history. And now, the match that probably everyone watching this video has been waiting for it to get broken down, the match that actually even broke CTWC history, that was set by Joseph. We did not only see another max out, but we saw a double max out in a competitive scene. So if that already isn't telling you that this is going to be a mind-blowing particular game breakdown, then I don't know what is. But anyways, the first mistake is actually going to be made by Greentea, roughly around 20 lines, and really it's not necessarily too much of a mistake as he doesn't burn any lines from it. However, there is a certain way that he could have built his board that would allow him to get a Tetris more efficiently and keep his board clean. Board accommodation, like I said, is kind of like the main theme of today's match, is board accommodation, which allows a certain player to score more often. We're getting close to where Greentea is actually going to make the first mistake of the game, roughly around 20 lines. And as you can see here, he does do a couple of nice moves. However, he does start to get a couple of jagged pieces, and that's going to prevent him from scoring Tetris off of that long bar and not going to be able to utilize that other long bar. So that's 2 long bars Greentea was being forced to pass up instead, and now he's being forced to kind of like dig, or not necessarily dig, but build in a certain way that would have actually allowed him to kind of score Tetris earlier. So what could he have done differently? Well, this actually all spires from this particular T-piece placement. So what he could have done with the T-piece is he could have laid the T-piece flat in columns 4 through 6. The I-piece would then go in columns 1, the Z would then go in columns 6 through 8, then the S following would have gone in columns 3 through 5, and then the L would have gone in columns 8 through 9, and then that would allow Greentea to have been able to convert off of the next available long bar. There was actually something else that I noticed that Greentea could have done while trying to, you know, navigate himself through this drought, and that's going to come right up here as soon as he starts building up. He does notice he kind of puts himself in not necessarily the best of situations right here. If he didn't rotate this piece, he would have just burned it out, and then he could either burned out the double with the square or place the square in a different position. Just, you know, one of those burns you don't really think of because it's, I wouldn't say it's 200 IQ, but it's pretty up there on the IQ list. Anyways, but that is actually not to be overshadowed because Joseph actually makes a misdrop at roughly around the same time, and his misdrop is actually more costly than 2 lines. In fact, his misdrop is going to cost him 11 burned lines, allowing Greentea to potentially take a 3 Tetris lead if he's able to convert on all those lines. So as you see right here, he does have this kind of like Z-piece dependency, and he didn't want to continue it, and so now he sets up a J-piece dependency. Now the issue with this is if you don't get the right pieces, this can easily start to get into a very detrimental situation. What he was trying to do was, it was a very smart setup. He was going to burn off with the O, but now he made a misdrop. So what could have been done differently in this situation? So one of the adjustments that he could have done to avoid putting himself in that situation is going to be right after he knocks down this Tetris, is when he gets this upcoming L piece, instead of kind of like laying it flat over there on column, like what he does on columns 6 through 8, what he could have done is he could have placed the L piece in columns 9 through 10, set up a delay burn. The I piece would then go in columns and go in column 4. The Z piece would then go in columns 5 through 6, the O piece in columns 1 through 2, and then another S in columns 4 through 5. Not only does this burn out the delay burn, but as I've been saying this entire video, it keeps his board very accommodated. And so because of this, Joseph is going to have to burn 11 lines. Now Greentea and Joseph are actually going to play rather good Tetris all the way up until 90 lines, when Joseph is actually going to make another misdrop, and this misdrop is going to cost him 13 lines. So we already have established that Joseph has already essentially given up 3 Tetrises to Greentea. Now he's potentially giving Greentea 3 more Tetrises. So let's go ahead and see what Joseph done and what he could have done to potentially either get out of this misdrop in a more efficient manner, or put himself in a position where he wouldn't have as likely of a chance to misdrop. So anyways, Joseph, he's going to knock down this Tetris, and now as you see, he doesn't necessarily get the pieces that he wants, and he continues to build this. Now this is very aggressive building. It is essentially okay to kind of have this kind of like T trough on the left hand side, but still very unideal, and that adjustment on that J piece caused him to misdrop. So actually the sequence that I'm going to discuss is going to kind of explain what he could have done to get out of the misdrop. So we're going to see how exactly this misdrop is going to kind of like impact his stack. As you see, he's going to go, he tries to kind of set up for a Tetris well, and he does burn down a triple, but then this S piece that he receives isn't friendly at all, and it's going to continue to cause him to burn even more. So what exactly could he have done differently to kind of get out of this dig faster? This is with, of course, misdrop integration. So even though he wasn't getting necessarily the friendliest of pieces, one thing that I say that he could have tried to do differently here is take the Z piece and go ahead and burn that off on columns 8 through 10. Burning that off on columns 8 through 10 keeps his stack safe, and he's only down by like a Tetris and a half. Playing aggressive, yes, that's, you know, the thing to do, but there's no reason to play that aggressive. You want your board to be in a accommodating state most times, and if you have your board in an accommodating state, not only do you put yourself in a good position to constantly stack for back-to-back Tetrises, but you also put yourself in a position to handle droughts and unfavorable piece sequences. And even then, right here, that was, I approve of that move. I say that was fine. What he could have tried to do was maybe set up a delay burn with the L piece and then place the J piece over there to the left, and then he would have got that S that would have burned out that J piece dependency, and then he would have eventually got all the pieces that he needs to score Tetris. So just another alternate adjustment that he could have done instead of building the way he built, and that might have avoided him from misdropping. And both of these players are going to keep up pace with each other up until roughly around the transition mark. Now, there is something I want to point out about the transition that I think is actually overlooked whenever people talk about this game, because Joseph actually didn't have that much of a transition. His post-transition was absolutely phenomenal. If we take a look at this game, Greentea is actually going to transition with a 598. Joseph is going to transition with a 514,000. Greentea with a 598, that's almost 600k post-trans, or not 600k post-trans, that's almost a 600k transition, meaning Greentea only has to score 400k post-transition to max out, which isn't a lot at all. Meanwhile, Joseph has to score nearly 500k as he's transitioned out of 514. So Greentea really does have an advantage being up by like almost 89 or almost 90,000 points. However, both of these players, you know, kept pace ever since that mistake. Greentea is, you know, keeping a very nice build, keeping it safe, and we're actually getting to a moment where I think is the pivotal moment here, and this all comes down to Joseph's ability to hyper tap. So he is going to be able to knock down this Tetris. However, Joseph, once he gets to 139 lines, you guys are going to see why his ability to hyper tap really allows him to win this game. This stack right here, incredibly bad stack. It's so vulnerable. You have a SZ or ST dependency. You have a T trough on the left. You have a high, you have a high right, and so there's no way for you to burn down. This kind of stack is very vulnerable to most players, and if you don't get pieces, you will top out building this stack, especially if you don't get the long bar to burn down at least a triple. So we see Joseph, and he's playing incredibly risky. Getting that Z piece over to the left, one of the key moments of this game. That getting that Z piece over is something that a Daz player could not do, and it continues to get better. He gets a T piece over to the left, another thing a Daz player could not do, and he continues to hold out, gets all the right pieces, and he gets the long bar for that Tetris. That's where the momentum shifts from Greentea over to Joseph. Now, Joseph is actually going to make the next mistake in this game, and it's going to come at 166 lines. And I know you guys are thinking this is actually pretty one-sided. Greentea has only made one mistake so far. Meanwhile, Joseph has been called out on just about 3 mistakes now once we get into this mistake at 166 lines, and that is actually shown by Greentea's gameplay. Greentea at very much 1.1 pace if he played the post transition to his finest. However, we're gonna go ahead and go into Joseph's next mistake, and this next mistake is gonna cost him not necessarily too many lines, but just it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's kind of a safer way to build, because the reason why it's a safer way to build is when we talk about level 19, the pieces move at 2 frames per cell, but that's not all. Anytime you try and do a spin, you only have 2 frames to hit that spin. After that second frame, it locks and then you're done. This is what Joseph does. He's able to hit that spin, and then he's lucky to get enough pieces. And so what is the safer way that a person that's maybe not confident in their spinning abilities on 19, or just really isn't just confident in their 19 stacking to that kind of potential, what is the safer way to kind of build that up? And that's really the reason why I wanted to point this out. It isn't necessarily that he made a mistake, it's just that there is a safer way to go about that, especially in tournament play. I wouldn't encourage trying to pull off spins on 19 unless it's absolutely necessary, because more often than not, if you miss that spin, then you're going to be in trouble if your board isn't in a friendly fashion. What could have been done instead of placing this L all the way over column 8 and 9 is he could have placed the L in columns 5 through 6. And I say place the L in columns 5 through 6 is because you look at this board, you now get rid of that kind of too deep, too wide gap. And getting rid of that too deep, too wide gap is very important, because you only have a couple. O piece is like the perfect piece for that, but the O is just one piece. You get rid of that too deep, too wide gap, and you open up the board for more pieces to kind of fit in that hole, more board accommodation. I feel like you guys are going to get sick and tired of me saying board accommodation as many times as I said it in this video. but it's more board accommodation, and because of all this, you know, board accommodation, it'll be, you know, better. But the L would have gone in columns 5 through 6, Z would have gone in columns 9 through 10, another Z would have gone in columns 7 through 9, and then the I piece would go in column 6, and the S would have gone in column 1 through 2, the J in column 7 through 9, the T in column 3 through 5, and Tetris. Now, although with the build that I discussed, there's many different ways that you could actually attack it with those pieces. However, the other different ways that I'm not mentioning don't allow you to convert a Tetris upon doing them, so they're not going to be mentioned here. But now we're actually going to get over to the first real mistake that Greentea makes, and it's going to be made at 177 lines, and this is where Greentea is actually going to start to lose his Greentea is going to start to fall behind because he's going to lose momentum. In a competitive Tetris scene, especially when you have same piece sets, every long bar you don't utilize is potentially a Tetris for your opponent. Triples are extremely painful to take on your higher levels on the post transition, so Greentea actually is forced to take a triple when there's actually a way he could have built his board in a better accommodative style. So right there, he takes the triple, and now that's going to kind of like start to spiral in things where Joseph starts to gain his momentum. What should Greentea do in order to avoid taking this triple? So we see how he's building right here. He knocks down long bar easily right here. He could have done 2 quick taps, or not necessarily quick taps, but 2 taps to move this Z piece over. If the Z piece would have gone in columns 4 through 5, then the L that follows would have gone in columns 6 through 8. The Z would then have gone in columns 3 through 4, so incredible accommodations. I piece would have gone in column 9, another I piece in column 1, the L would go in columns 6 through 8, the O would then go in columns 2 through 3, and then he scores a Tetris on the long bar that he would have burned a triple with, maintaining a 60,000 point lead up against Joseph. However, because Greentea is not able to kind of convert on that Tetris, then Joseph is going to start. Now Joseph is only 1 Tetris behind. Now we are actually getting to what I consider is the exact moment that Greentea lost this game. And the reason why I say that Greentea lost this game is most people attribute Greentea losing this game to maybe the end of 26, maybe the latter part of 27. I feel it's actually the board state from 25 why Greentea lost this game. So right here, Greentea, he's set up for a Tetris. He's going to knock down a Tetris. Now this board state and the way that he builds this up, that's 3 too deep dependencies. And those 3 too deep dependencies, you're begging RNG to give you perfect pieces. And as you can see here, RNG isn't going to give him perfect pieces. And this is actually going to be rather costly. Now notice, earlier in the video I said that from 26 to 28, there is 250,000 points to be awarded. That's 30 lines. Because of this board state Greentea went into level 26 with, he ends up burning 15 lines. He's missing out on just about 100,000 points of his potential score. After burning 15 lines, Greentea is going to fall behind in this game. So, what is it in level 25 that I claim is why he is going to essentially lose this game? It all starts right here. So instead of placing this J piece the way that he does and standing up that J piece, the easiest solution for this, and we're going to go back just a little bit just so you guys can see, the easiest solution for this would be to place the 2 J pieces to where they take up the most space. So that right there, I approve of placing that J piece right there. However, what he should have done next is place the J piece in columns 2 through 4. The L would then go in columns 5 through 7. Then the J in columns 8 through 10. The T would then go in columns 8 through 10 for a safe burn. And then he would have got a Tetris and a perfect clear. And in doing that, he now puts himself in a clean slate to potentially go perfect from level 26 to 28. But because he wasn't able to recognize this adjustment, that puts him in a very unfavorable board state. So if we go to his current board state, there is still one adjustment that he could have done. Instead of placing the eyepiece on column 9, he should have placed the eyepiece in column 6. After placing the eyepiece in column 6, he could have then placed the T piece in columns 7 and 8. The J piece would then go in columns 3 through 4. Put the O piece in columns 9 through 10 for a safe double. This kind of stacking allows Greentea to have much room needed to burn off if he runs into a drought, as well as board accommodation. Really trying to stress that's what made the difference in these close games. Board accommodation. Lack of board accommodation is what separates both of these players in the respective games that they won. However, there was only 8 lines burned due to the first mistake made in 25. The next 7 lines are going to come from when we get to roughly 207 lines, which after seeing Greentea being put in this position, there is still another way he could have burnt out in the most efficient manner possible. He does this, I approve, with the flat long bar. Putting that T piece all the way over to the left, that is the mistake that kind of, in addition to the level 20 transitioning with such a bad level 25 board state, the board state from level 25 is what causes this. But assuming that the board state from level 25 could not have been, not the 25 transition level 26 could not have been averted, this is what kills Greentea this game. This is why Greentea cannot win with this board state. And here's why. T-piece is touchdown. You have to quick tap a long bar over 7 high. You have to have a full dash charge, and you'd have to get a quick tap in order to get that over. And Greentea is phenomenal at quick taps. However, he misses this quick tap. Now, if he would have moved the T-piece over 1 cell to the right, he might have been able to get that quick tap over. Anyways, so after, the way that he could have solved this is, like I said, put the T piece in columns 2 through 4. Then the L piece would have gone in columns 7 through 8. Then the I piece would have gone in columns 1. The S would have then gone in columns 4 through 6. The Z piece would have gone in columns 2 through 3. The J piece in columns 8 through 10. O piece in columns 8 through 9. And then a Tetris. And doing that, Greentea would have stayed in the game, as well as he would have a cleaner board to start building up on level 27 for. Now, there is still a possibility that Greentea is able to potentially come back, because Joseph made a mistake at 218 lines. So let's go ahead and jump to 219 lines, where Greentea kind of sealed the fate for this game. So Greentea, I approve of the way that he's building right here. Now 219 lines, this is pretty fair. Right here, the placement of that J piece right there isn't necessarily what kind of stops him from having the potential to win this game. However, it is the start of a couple of following moves that is going to stop him. So, seeing as this plays out, he's going to misdrop that piece, and then he's going to do a Greentea and able to get it over. Now, what could he have done? What is this move that I'm talking about? What am I getting out of here? Instead of placing that J piece right there, and I'm having to keep on rewinding because it just happened so fast. Instead of placing that J piece right there, what he should have done was he should have placed the J piece in columns 3 through 5. Then the Z could have gone in columns 6 through 7. Then the J that follows would have gone in columns 4 through 6. Then the Z gone in columns 2 through 3. The O would have gone in columns 4 through 5. and then the Z would have gone in columns 7 through 9, and he would have scored a Tetris and had a clean board going into level 28. Now, even with this method, there's still something that he can do, and it's not that necessarily if he had done this, he wouldn't have misdropped it, because he'd be going a completely different direction. What he could have done, assuming we start from, you know, the first J that was in the sequence, is the Z would have gone in columns 2 through 4, which he did, but then the J would have gone in columns 8 through 10 instead of trying stacking on top of the Z. Then the following Z would have gone in columns 5 through 6, burning out that line. The O would have gone in columns 2 through 3, another Z in columns 7 through 8, and Tetris. After this, the game no longer becomes winnable for Greentea, and Joseph is going to win this game. However, had Greentea done that, there was still potential, because why? Joseph made a mistake. So Joseph is going to make a mistake at 218 lines, and the mistake that he's going to make is he's going to set that up. Now, let it not be said, this is actually a spin tuck that is possible. However, when you're on 19 spin tucks, you only have 2 frames to perform them, and Joseph, if you look right here, right there, he accidentally does another shift within the next frame that's going to not allow him to hit the spin tuck. However, doing the spin tuck, even when you're at this late in the game, not something you want to do. You're up 43,000 points. That's only a Tetris and a half from your opponent. You want to try and get your Tetrises as cleanly as possible, and a person like Joseph who can play into kill screen, that is something that you need to focus on, making sure your board is ready to score those extra lines in kill screen. After Joseph hangs of the TPs, after of course scoring this Tetris and getting the max out, there's actually a couple of solutions to what he could have done to get out of this. So he gets that long bar over. Instead of placing that T piece all the way, like just laying it flat, what he could have done is set up a delayed triple burn, or triple line burn. So what he does is he placed the T piece in columns 9 through 10. Then the L piece would go in columns 8 through 9, burning a single. And then he would have done an O tuck in 3 through 4. Now you take a look at this board, and it's much more accommodating. And because it's much more accommodating, Joseph still has potential to score more than just one Tetris in the post transition. Now, even if he does place the T piece in columns 7 through 9, what he can do is place the L piece in columns 9 through 10 to go ahead and burn a double, O tuck, and 3 through 4. Both of these solutions have better board accommodation and would allow him to score more points than if he would have just, continued to go for that spin tuck. However, because of that spin tuck, he puts his board in such a disarray, he's only able to score one more Tetris, and he burns 7 lines. So the greatest match in history could have actually been greater had mistakes been avoided by both of these players. After breaking down the best match in CTWC history, now we can kind of dive into the mathematical aspect, and actually had both of these kind of mistakes been minimized, we could have both seen potentially 1.1s, even 1.2s from both of these players. For example, both of these players both had 3 notable mistakes that resulted in burned lines. Joseph had to burn 31 lines, Greentea had to burn 22. The total score lost by Greentea from his 22 lines was 190,000, and for Joseph is 206,000. Now, what you can kind of gather from this as the disparity between both of their scores lost from burned lines is 10,000 points, which is interesting, and allow me to kind of explain why. Joseph burned 31 lines, Greentea burned 22. There's an 8-line difference between both of those numbers, which would approximate to 2 Tetrises. However, the disparity between them isn't 2 Tetrises, and that's because Greentea didn't really make any of the notable mistakes in level 18. All of his mistakes were more costly. Joseph, the bulk of his lines came from level 18. As his level 18, he gave up 136,000 points to Greentea, which actually explains the transition lead that Greentea had. Greentea, of course, had 590, almost a 600k transition. Joseph with barely a 500k transition, which means that Joseph actually scored 500k posts, and Greentea had to score like 400k posts. So had Joseph transitioned higher, he definitely would have 1.1 in this game. And if Greentea would have been able to play a little bit better throughout certain levels and not been put in the situation, like I said, at 25, that cost him 15 burn lines, which cost him over 100,000 points in the last little stretch, then Greentea could have potentially taken this game, or we could have even seen 1.1 from both of these players. Now, although the breakdown of the best game in CTWC history is now over, we still got one more game left to go out, and unfortunately Greentea is going to early top out, but let's go and explore why. Now we're going to get started with game 4, the game where Greentea unfortunately topped out early, but still played some pretty good Tetris overall. And Joseph is actually going to be getting into a lot of trouble early on this game, so Greentea actually had potential to take the game from him and force a decider between the two, and boy, would that be a decider. Anyways, Greentea is actually going to make the first mistake, and it's going to cost him 4 burn lines, nothing too major. First mistake is going to be made roughly around 18 lines, and we're actually approaching there right now. So he does go for the tuck, and now you see things aren't starting to get a little bit unfavorable for Greentea. He is going to knock down the Tetris. However, when he looked away, that's kind of what caused him to err. Now, easy solution, what he could have done for that is, easy solution right here. He knocks down a Tetris. O piece goes in columns 4 and 5. Then the L would gone in columns 8 through 10 and kind of burn out that line. And then the Z would have gone in columns 7 through 8. Singular burned line, 1 is better than 4. Greentea would have been kept clean. Now, Joseph gets put into a situation in which I actually want you guys to kind of interact with me on this. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different answers, and I'm going to explain which of the answers that I provide you is either right, wrong, ideal, or not ideal. So this is actually going to come up around 26 lines for Joseph, and right now he's trying to avoid 7 belong bar penalty. Very nice. He kind of sets up this unfavorable thing. Now right here we get to the moment. There is a couple of places where you can place this L piece. He can place this L piece on columns 1 through 2, columns 3 through 4, columns 5 through 7, or columns 9 and 10. I'm going to give you guys a little bit to decide which is the place where he should place this L piece. If you said columns 3 through 4, that is the decision that Joseph did. And as you can see how the pieces play out, this is actually what's going to cost him 12 lines because of that unfavorable S. Now, ideally, what he should have done is he should have placed the L in columns 1 and 2. Having the L in columns 1 and 2, that not only builds up your left side, putting it, higher in column 1, but then the J piece would have gone in columns 3 through 4, and then the following long bar would have been used to knock down a Tetris, and then the S piece would have kind of fill in the gap that was created whenever you did the LJ. Now, there are, like I said, other options you could have done in that particular situation. So for example, you could have, burned off the L to the side and then place the J piece, and then still got a Tetris, and then use the S, put in columns 2 through 3. However, that also sets up a J piece dependency, and you want to kind of avoid dependencies, especially when you're up a game, going up against such a strong player like Greentea. You want to try and play safe, but not necessarily passive. It is, you can technically lose the game and still, have another chance at victory. You don't want to take too many risks, and setting up dependencies, especially when you're not necessarily extremely low on the board, could spell downfall. Another adjustment, like I said, was putting the L piece on columns 5 through 7. essentially it would turn out the same. You place the L piece in columns 5 through 7, place the J piece in columns 3 through 4, and then get the long bar and knock down Tetris, and then put an S in columns 1, or not columns 1, in columns 2 through 3, still forcing the J piece dependency. So by putting the L piece in columns 1 through 2, and then the following J piece in columns 3 through 4, and getting the I piece as well as the S piece, you now have the board with the most accommodation, and you won't have to burn 12 lines. For the next one, we're actually going to discuss a preventative measure that would allow Joseph to once again avoid another 12 line burn, as opposed to having, you know, to burn 12 lines. That's already 24 lines that would have been burned by Joseph. That's 6 Tetrises Greentea could have achieved while Joseph could not. So anyways, we got Joseph at 50 lines. Now, this is rather a precarious situation, not necessarily the most favorable. It's another one where there was actually multiple adjustments that could have been done. So for example, you have really 4 main places for the long bar. This one is a little bit more obvious than the previous one, but you can either place the long bar in columns 2, 3, 4, or 5. So there's once again, there's going to be a pole in the upper right, which you would place. So Joseph, he places it in column 2. Now, the issue with this is his next piece is a square piece. He only has very few places where you can place it as a square. And in setting up a square in the next, in that little 3 wide gap, he sets up a dependency in which he's going to get another square and sets up a long bar dependency, which is going to already not put him in a favorable position. So ideally, he could try and put the long bar in column 1, because he is a hyper tapper and he can get that long bar all the way over. However, in doing so, he would kind of set up a LJ dependency once he gets that square, or it would just be an L piece dependency. Ideally, no one would say, I hope no one would say that he should place the I piece in column 4, because that creates an I piece dependency and an L piece dependency, and you have no place for the O. But what about placing the I piece in column 3? I piece in column 3 is also another interesting choice. However, you also set up a J piece dependency. So what is the best way to set up, what is the best placement? Placing the I piece in column 5 would allow you to place the square in columns 3 through 4, and then you could place that second square in columns 2 through 3. Now, in placing that second square in columns 2 through 3, you now have an L or J dependency. And having an L or J dependency is very ideal, because you now have 2 pieces that can solve that particular situation, as opposed to just a standard J piece dependency. There's actually a way that he could have dug out of this efficiently, even if he doesn't do, you know, the preventative measure that we kind of discussed. So after taking the J double, instead of placing that S piece right there, he should have thrown the S piece all the way over to the left side in columns 1 through 2. Why? Placing that S piece over there sets up a long bar dependency. And like I said, in a game of NES Tetris where the long bar isn't guaranteed, because he could have ran into a 50-piece drought. There's no telling what could have happened. So what he should have done is place the S piece in columns 1 through 2. Ideally, the O would go in columns 7 and 8, maybe even 7 and 9 if you would like it, but O would go in columns 7 and 8. Then the Z piece would go in columns 5 through 6, and then the J piece that follows would have burned it out, and he would have been Tetris ready, and that would only have been 4 burned lines as opposed to 12. Now we're actually going to get into, unfortunately, where Greentea starts to make the mistakes where it's going to kind of end his game. So it doesn't get very favorable pieces. I like the way that he kind of digs out of it, and right here. Now this is another one that I like you guys to guess, and this will be the final one for the kind of like poll things. If you guys enjoy you know, the poll and the interactive stuff, let me know down in the comments below, and we'll try and do these for more CTMAs. But anyways, he has the option to place the long bar in columns 1, 2, 3, 4, or 9. So which one should he place the eyepiece in? So Greentea, what he's going to do is he's going to place the long bar in column 1. Ideally, you have a couple of options where you could place the long bar. Obviously, you wouldn't want to place the long bar in column 2 because that forces a long bar dependency. Placing the long bar in column 3 is an option, but you build up a J piece dependency, and in a tournament match, like I said, dependencies are not what you want. And then you could obviously place it in column 4 or 9. Personally, for me, I'd place the eyepiece in column 4, then the T piece in columns 1 through 3, and then place the eyepiece in column 9. Now, the reason why I say place the eyepiece in column 4 is because in the instance that we don't get an eyepiece right after this T piece, then we are given a way to kind of like burn down just in case things start to get bad. If we decide to just directly place the eyepiece on column 9 without filling in like any too deep dependencies or doing any kind of tightening builds, then all of a sudden we might find ourselves with a very troubling build. And because of that, you know, things can start to get a little bit rough on us. But anyways, to finish out the sequence, after I place the eyepiece in column 9, following the T piece in columns 1 through 3, the Z would have gone in columns 6 through 7, then another eyepiece would have gone in column 8, then another Z in columns 6 through 7, then the eyepiece would finally go in column 1, and then the O would go in columns 2 through 3. This is, of course, based upon the recognition that the O is next, so then you kind of cut down that 3 wide gap into just a 2 wide, so you have a spot for that O. And then the L would go in column 4 through 5, or you could put the eyepiece in column 5, the O in columns 1 through 2, and then put the L in columns 2 through 3. So there was 2 different ways that he could have solved that. However, this is actually what's going to start to determine the outcome of this game. And there's actually one other point to where Greentea had an opportunity to save himself. And I'm going to show you guys that once we get to it. It's going to happen at 82 lines. And he's actually building this very creatively. I like the way he's building it. Now, right here, he places the T piece all the way over to the left. Which is interesting is because normally, based upon my personal stacking theory, I like to do T-tucks underneath the kind of formation that Greentea has built up for a tuck. So if he would have potentially tucked the T piece underneath, then he would have given himself room to burn and room to build up on the left hand side. He could even just dump that Z all the way over. In fact, this is exactly what I would have done. And the T tuck in 7 through 9, then the Z would have gone in columns 1 through 2, and then an L for a triple on 9 through 10. This particular board, I'd take the triple is because it's not friendly enough. The pieces just aren't friendly, and the piece sequence, because it's not friendly, I'm trying to avoid putting myself in a situation where I am now piece reliant. Remember, you have to think of the mentality of where you're at in the game. Greentea, he is down 1 game. If he loses this game, then he is out of the tournament. He wants to stay aggressive to make it as hard for Joseph to come back, but at the same time, he needs to put himself into a safe position to where he's not playing too risky. He's not giving RNG too many chances to give him a bad piece sequence and to top him out. So even after this, something that he could have done is just taken a safe double with the L piece and just knock down the stack just a little bit more. But instead he goes for that tuck, and doing that tuck, the reason why I personally don't like to do it is because it makes my column 9 higher, which means I'm prevented from burning. And as you can see, Greentea just continues to not get friendly pieces, and things are just going to spiral, just continue to build up and spiral out of control from here. And unfortunately, after a misdrop with a square, that's going to be the end of Greentea not able to quite dig out, just not getting all the right pieces. So Joseph is now just left with a 2 Tetris deficit to come back from, which is, very easy, especially on level 18. But that's actually going to do it for all 4 games of Joseph versus Greentea, the greatest match in CTWC history. So now game 4, there's going to be just a little bit unique thing that's going to be unique about this map. Down at the bottom right, you can see ET. The ET stands for early top out, which kind of explains why the mathematical total from the last burned lines weren't included. Anyways, from this, Greentea had 3 notable mistakes, 2 of course leading to his unfortunate early top out in this game. His mistake, there was one at the beginning that cost him 4 lines, which allowed him to lose 22,000 points from burned lines. However, Joseph was already starting off the game very rough. He had 2 mistakes that costed him 24 lines, which put him at a deficit of 136,000 points that he could have gave up to Greentea. However, Joseph did outlast Greentea in this particular situation, meaning that all he had to do was just score a couple measly Tetrises in order to come back and take this game. And unfortunately, that is going to be how the greatest match in CTWC history at the time of making this video will end. Before we get into what's going to be coming up on CTMA, or Classic Tetris Matches Analyzed, I first would like to say a couple of things about this breakdown. Number 1, the mathematics side. Now, the mathematics are not going to be exact, as I think I said in the video. They are rough approximations that are only going through Tetris values. And the reason why I did this is because I don't necessarily want to have you guys to kind of like try and find the exact number, through singles, doubles, and triples. I only took Tetrises and I rounded up anything that was 2 or higher into a Tetris. The reason why I did the mathematics that way is because I want you guys to see the perspective of points that was lost in either the pre-transition or, certain levels in the post-transition. I feel like seeing that perspective is kind of important in understanding the gravity that some of these mistakes had on the outcome of any particular game. Number 2, it would be the way that I kind of presented the sequences and things of that nature. And the reason why I bring this up is because in a game of Tetris, everyone has their own, unique way of thinking. And this is how I personally felt like the matches could have been swayed if these particular adjustments and these particular notable mistakes were dealt with, in a different manner. Now, I encourage you guys, of course, to have your own opinions, and if you do have your own opinions, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to get a healthy conversation discussing, alternate adjustments that you yourself might have found. This is, a great way for us to interact with each other, to kind of understand different stacking patterns and stacking theory. And that's kind of, something that I want, CTA to do to help people understand certain aspects of Classic Tetris stacking theory, as stacking theory for Classic Tetris hasn't really been that much to explored with outside of, the basics, sloping left to right, a couple of spins and setups here and there. But there's really a lot that can be discovered and documented, and hopefully that can be what CTMA will eventually evolve to, is us finding the way that stacking theory can be optimized for the optimal efficiency. Now, lastly, I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on the poll system that I did in Game 4. I feel like doing those polls where it puts you, the viewer, in a position where you have to think of, okay, what's the best move for me? What move can I do that would give me the most accommodation, that could potentially, avoid me from getting in trouble? I feel like whenever you put yourself in that kind of mindset, that helps you think of your own, personal stacking theory, and that allows you to kind of, cement certain patterns where you're able to, avoid potentially topping out because you remember a pattern. So I want to hear your guys' opinion on the poll system. Anyways, now let's go ahead and move on to coming up on CTMA. As still currently in production. Harry versus Matt Martin, dual commentary by me and AMJ Productions. His channel will be linked down in the description below. He is still currently working on it. You guys saw how long it took me to make Joseph versus Greentea, so please be patient, but it is still a very insightful game when it is get made. It will be up on AMJ's channel once again. Secondly, back on my channel is going to be another dual commentary. However, it's not going to be with AMJ. The dual commentary is going to be with a game scout, aka a song scout, and the match we're going to be breaking down is Bat Boy versus Svalvar, actually a very heavily underrated match that will be coming up soon, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Also, comment down which match from this past CTWC that you want to see broken down next. I might do a solo commentary, or I might get AMJ in the booth here for another commentary, or I might be able to find someone else that might want to break down something with me. Who knows? Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this match breakdown between Joseph and Greentea. If you made it all the way to the end, put who are you rooting for, hashtag JDMFX or hashtag Greentea. If you like this match breakdown and you'd like to see more, then leave a like. Share it with your Tetris enthusiasts. I'm pretty sure your friends wouldn't want to watch like an hour-and-a-half video discussing the analytical side of Tetris. I mean, unless they got time to waste, then go ahead, share it with your friends, but I'm pretty sure they won't. Comment down, like I said, your opinions, which matches that you want to see from this past CTWC broken down, all that good stuff. And while all my videos aren't basically movies on breaking down the analytical side of classic Tetris matches from CTWC, there's still plenty of content here on my channel, and if you like it, why not stick around for a bit? Anyways, my name is Michael, better known as ITZsharky, your classic Tetris analyst, and I'll see you all in the next episode of CTMA.